Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mix-Up. Gerard Baxter adjusted his tie as he walked through the gleaming lobby of Meridian Financial, the investment firm where he'd worked as a senior analyst for the past 8 years. At 34, Gerard had built a reputation for his sharp, analytical mind and unshakable composure, traits that had served him well in both his professional life and his role as a devoted father to 7-year-old Emma. The morning had started like any other. His wife, Sally, a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, had been rushing to get Emma ready for school while Gerard prepared for an important client presentation. In the chaos of breakfast and backpack checking, Sally had grabbed what she thought was Gerard's laptop bag and handed it to him at the door. "Don't forget your presentation files," she'd said, kissing him goodbye. "Thanks, hon. See you tonight," Gerard had replied, not bothering to check the bag as he headed out. It wasn't until 2 p.m., when Gerard reached for his laptop to review quarterly reports, that he realized the mistake. Instead of his sleek black briefcase, he'd been carrying Emma's bright purple backpack with cartoon unicorns dancing across the fabric. Gerard chuckled to himself, imagining Emma's confusion when she discovered she had his boring work bag instead of her school supplies. He unzipped the backpack to see what treasures his daughter had packed for second grade. What he found made him laugh out loud. 3 different colored pens, a half-eaten granola bar, a crumpled math worksheet with gold stars, and a small plastic container that looked like one of those pill organizers elderly people use for medication. Gerard picked up the container, smiling at Emma's organizational skills. She must have been keeping her vitamins sorted by day. "Hey, Stuart, come look at this," Gerard called to his colleague in the neighboring cubicle. Stuart Clements was a brilliant financial advisor who'd joined Meridian 2 years ago after an unexpected career change. Before numbers and portfolios, Stuart had spent 15 years as an emergency room physician at Denver General Hospital. Stuart rolled his chair over, his perpetually serious expression softening slightly. "What V you got there, Gerard?" "Emma's backpack got mixed up with my briefcase this morning. Look at this. My 7-year-old is more organized than half our clients." Gerard held up the pill organizer. "She's got her vitamins sorted by day of the week. Kids these days, right?" Stuart's face changed instantly. The mild amusement vanished, replaced by something Gerard had never seen before: raw, undiluted fear. Stuart's hands trembled as he took the container from Gerard's hands, his medical training kicking in as he examined it closely. "Gerard," Stuart's voice was barely a whisper, "where did Emma get this?" "What do you mean?" "It's just her vitamin organizer. Sally probably set it up for her." Stuart's face had gone completely ashen. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "Gerard, listen to me very carefully. Drop everything you're doing. Get your daughter from school and drive to the hospital. Now." "What?" "Stuart, what's wrong? You're scaring me. If I tell you what I think this is, you'll freeze up and waste precious time. Just move. Get Emma and get to St. Mary's emergency room. Tell them Dr. Stuart Clements sent you and that it's a possible poisoning case. Do it now." Gerard had known Stuart for 2 years, and he'd never seen the man lose his composure. The urgency in his voice, the way his medical instincts had taken over, it sent ice through Gerard's veins. "I'm calling Sally," Gerard said, already reaching for his phone. "No time. Go. I'll call ahead to the hospital and explain." Gerard, run. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Gerard broke multiple speed limits getting to Emma's school. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white, and his mind raced through every possible scenario. What could be in that innocent-looking pill organizer that would make a former ER doctor react like that? Pine Ridge Elementary was in its afternoon dismissal routine when Gerard burst through the front doors. The secretary, Mrs. Patterson, looked up in surprise. "Mr. Baxter? Is everything all right? School doesn't end for another hour. I need to pick up Emma immediately. Family emergency." Mrs. Patterson must have seen something in his expression because she didn't ask any follow-up questions. Within 5 minutes, Emma was walking down the hallway, her small hand clutched in Gerard's larger one, confusion written across her face. "Daddy, why are you here?" Did I do something wrong? Gerard forced himself to stay calm as he buckled Emma into her car seat. No, sweetheart. Mommy needs us to meet her at the hospital where she works. Nothing's wrong. We just need to go there quickly. During the 15-minute drive to St. Mary's, Gerard called Sally. When she answered, he could hear the controlled chaos of the pediatric ward in the background. Gur? What's going on? Dr. Clements called here asking about Emma and something about poisoning. You're scaring me. I'll explain everything when I see you. Meet us in the emergency room. And Sally, bring whoever's in charge of toxicology. St. Mary's Hospital emergency room was a place Sally knew well, but seeing it from a parent's perspective sent chills down her spine. Gerard arrived with Emma just as Sally was walking through the automatic doors, her nurse's uniform still on from her shift. Mommy! Emma ran to Sally, who scooped her up despite the girl being almost too big to carry. What's this about? Sally asked Gerard, her professional nurse's demeanor fighting with her maternal panic. Gerard pulled the pill organizer from his jacket pocket. This was in Emma's backpack. Stuart took one look at it and told me to get her here immediately. Sally examined the container, her nursing experience immediately noting the careful organization and the way the pills were sorted. But like Gerard, she didn't see anything obviously dangerous. These look like children's vitamins, she said. The pink ones look like the gummy vitamins I give her every morning. Dr. Patricia Farrell, the head of emergency medicine, approached them. Sally had worked with her for 3 years and knew her as a no-nonsense physician who didn't waste time on false alarms. Mrs. Baxter, Dr. Clements called ahead. He's on his way here now, but he wanted us to start blood work immediately. Dr. Farrell knelt down to Emma's level. Hi there, sweetheart. We're going to do some quick tests to make sure you're feeling okay. I feel fine, Emma said, but she allowed herself to be led to a triage bed. The triage nurse, Janet Collier, was a veteran with 25 years of experience. She'd seen everything the ER could throw at her, but when Dr. Farrell handed her the pill organizer to examine, Janet's face went completely white. The busy emergency room seemed to pause. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the constant beeping of monitors seemed to quiet as Janet opened the container and examined its contents under a magnifying light. Dear God, Janet whispered, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Dr. Farrell, these aren't vitamins. Gerard felt his world tilt on its axis. What are they? Dr. Farrell took the container and examined it herself, her expression growing more grave by the second. These are digoxin tablets, disguised to look like children's vitamins. Someone has been systematically poisoning your daughter. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of blood tests for lines and carefully controlled medical procedures. Emma, thankfully, was stable, but the blood work confirmed everyone's worst fears. She had dangerous levels of digoxin in her system, a heart medication that could be fatal in the wrong dosages, especially for a child. Gerard sat in the family consultation room with Sally, both of them trying to process what they'd learned. Dr. Farrell had explained that someone had been giving Emma small, carefully calculated doses over time, enough to make her occasionally tired and nauseous, but not enough to cause immediate collapse. Someone's been slowly poisoning our daughter for weeks, Sally said, her voice hollow. The mild symptoms we thought were just growing pains or tiredness from school. The nausea she complained about after lunch, Gerard added. We thought it was just cafeteria food. Stuart arrived at the hospital still wearing his work clothes, having driven straight from the office. His medical background had already kicked into overdrive, and he was coordinating with Dr. Farrell on Emma's treatment plan. The good news is we caught it in time, Stuart explained to Gerard and Sally. Digoxin poisoning is treatable if detected early. The bad news is that whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random, it was calculated, methodical. Detective Omar Ross from the city's Crimes Against Children unit arrived as Emma was being moved to a private room for overnight observation. Ross was a tall, imposing man with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much evil in his 20-year career. But he also had 2 daughters of his own, and cases involving children brought out his most determined side. Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, I need to ask you some difficult questions, Detective Ross said as they settled into the family room. Who has regular access to Emma's food, her belongings, her daily routine? Gerard ran through the list. Sally and I, obviously. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Wise. The school cafeteria staff. Her after-school babysitter, Francine Kemp. My mother-in-law, Minnie Herbert, who watches her some weekends. What about Emma's father? Detective Ross asked Sally directly. Gerard felt a flash of irritation. I am her father. Biological father, Ross clarified gently. I have to ask. Sally's expression darkened. Eugene McNamara. My ex-husband. But he hasn't seen Emma in over 2 years. The court ordered supervised visitation only after the incident. Gerard knew some of the story, but Sally had never shared all the details of her first marriage. He knew Eugene had been controlling and emotionally abusive, and that the divorce had been bitter. What he didn't know was why the court had restricted Eugene's access to Emma. What incident? Detective Ross asked. Sally looked at Gerard, then back at the detective. Eugene tried to kidnap Emma from her daycare 2 years ago. Said I was an unfit mother and that he was taking her somewhere safe. The police found them 6 hours later at a motel outside the city. Emma was terrified. Gerard felt anger building in his chest. In the 3 years he'd been married to Sally, Eugene had been nothing more than a distant shadow, an occasional angry phone call that Sally would handle privately, or a missed child support payment. Gerard had never considered him a real threat. Since then, Eugene's been unstable, Sally continued. He lost his job, started drinking heavily. The court requires any visits to be supervised at a family services center, but he hasn't shown up for one in 18 months. Detective Ross was taking detailed notes. Mrs. Baxter, I need you to think carefully. Has Eugene had any contact with Emma recently? Any way he could have accessed her food or belongings? No, I don't think so. We've been careful about that. What about indirect contact? Anyone who might be helping him? Gerard's analytical mind was already working through the possibilities. Detective, how would someone get access to prescription digoxin? That's not something you can just buy. Good question. Eugene McNamara, what's his background? Sally's face grew even paler. He's a pharmaceutical sales representative. Or was before he lost his job. He specialized in cardiac medications. The room fell silent. Detective Ross closed his notepad and stood up. Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, I'm going to be honest with you. This is all the hallmarks of a very serious crime. Someone with pharmaceutical knowledge has been systematically poisoning your daughter, likely as part of a larger plan. We need to move quickly. Stewart, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Gerard, I think you and Sally need to consider the possibility that this isn't random. If Eugene has been planning something for 2 years, the poisoning might just be the beginning. Gerard looked at his wife, saw the fear in her eyes, and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. Someone had tried to hurt Emma, his Emma, the little girl who called him daddy and drew him pictures of their family that he kept framed on his desk. Someone had been slowly poisoning her, making her sick, potentially planning something even worse. As he sat in that hospital room, watching his daughter sleep peacefully despite the 4 in her small arm, Gerard Baxter made a decision. The law would handle this their way, but Gerard would handle it his way. And his way wouldn't involve courts, lawyers, or second chances. Eugene McNamara had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 4. Uncovering the Truth. Over the next 3 days, while Emma recovered in the hospital under careful monitoring, Gerard threw himself into investigation mode. His background in financial analysis had taught him how to trace patterns, follow paper trails, and connect seemingly unrelated dots. Now, he was applying those skills to something far more personal and urgent. Detective Ross had been thorough, but was bound by legal procedures and bureaucratic red tape. Gerard had no such limitations. Working from Emma's hospital room during the day and from his home office at night, Gerard began building a comprehensive picture of Eugene McNamara's life over the past 2 years. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Eugene hadn't just been unstable. He'd been methodically planning something. Using his knowledge of database systems and his connections in the financial world, Gerard was able to trace Eugene's activities in ways the police couldn't immediately access. Eugene had been unemployed for 14 months, but his bank records showed regular small deposits from various pharmaceutical companies. Not salaries, but payments for consulting work. Gerard recognized the pattern. Eugene was selling information about drug inventory, shipment schedules, and security protocols to black market dealers. But more disturbing were Eugene's searches and purchases. Through a contact at a private investigation firm that Meridian Financial sometimes used for due diligence, Gerard obtained Eugene's internet history from the past 6 months. The searches painted a picture of a man obsessed with custody laws, parental rights, and increasingly, with ways to prove that Sally was an unfit mother. He's been planning to take Emma, Gerard told Sally on the third night, showing her printed copies of Eugene's online activity. Look at these searches: how to prove mother mentally unstable, custody rights for fathers, temporary guardianship laws. Sally stared at the papers, her nursing background helping her understand the medical implications. The poisoning, he wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to make her sick enough that it would look like I was neglecting her health. Exactly. And look at this. Gerard showed her a series of searches from 3 weeks ago. Symptoms of child neglect, reporting suspected abuse, emergency custody procedures. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Eugene had been slowly poisoning Emma with carefully measured doses of digoxin, causing symptoms that could be attributed to poor parenting, fatigue, nausea, difficulty concentrating in school. When the symptoms became serious enough, he would anonymously report Sally to Child Protective Services, then swoop in as the concerned biological father demanding custody. There's more, Gerard said grimly. He pulled out another set of documents. Eugene's been in contact with a lawyer who specializes in emergency custody cases, and he's rented an apartment in Colorado under a false name. Sally's hands were shaking. He was going to disappear with her. Not if I have anything to say about it. Detective Ross arrived the next morning with official confirmation of what Gerard had already discovered through his own channels. We've got enough evidence to arrest Eugene McNamara on charges of child endangerment and attempted kidnapping. There's just one problem. We can't find him. What do you mean? Sally asked. He's disappeared. Cleared out of his apartment 3 days ago, right around the time you discovered the pills. Someone tipped him off. Gerard felt a chill run down his spine. How could he have known? Detective Ross looked uncomfortable. We're investigating that. But Mr. Baxter, I need to ask, who else knew about the discovery at the hospital? Gerard mentally reviewed everyone who had been present. The medical staff, Stewart themselves, and the babysitter, Francine Kemp. She called Sally asking if Emma was okay because Emma seemed tired during her last session. When was that? 2 days ago. Sally told her we were at the hospital running some tests. Detective Ross was already reaching for his phone. We need to bring in Francine Kemp for questioning. But when they arrived at Francine's address, they found another empty apartment. The landlord told them she'd given notice a week ago and moved out yesterday. This is bigger than we thought, Detective Ross said as they stood in the empty living room. Eugene didn't just have access to pharmaceutical supplies. He had inside help. Someone who could monitor Emma's daily routine. Someone trusted enough to be in your home. Gerard's analytical mind was working overtime. Francine's been our babysitter for 6 months. Sally found her through an agency that supposedly vetted their employees. I'm starting to think that agency might not be as legitimate as we believed, Sally said quietly. That evening, Gerard sat in Emma's hospital room while she slept, Sally having gone home to shower and bring back fresh clothes. Stewart had stopped by after work, and the two men sat in the dim room, discussing what they knew. Gerard, I've been thinking about this all day, Stewart said. I've seen a lot of cases in the ER, but this level of calculation is unusual. Eugene isn't just desperate, he's methodical. And if he's gone underground with help from others, he's not going to give up easily. What are you saying? I'm saying that even when the police find him, you need to be prepared for a long legal battle. And in the meantime, Emma's safety is at risk every day he's out there. Gerard looked at his sleeping daughter, her small chest rising and falling peacefully, the force still in her arm providing the antidote to the poison someone had been feeding her. In that moment, something hardened inside him. Stewart, You know I've never been a violent man. I know, but Emma is my daughter. Maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. And someone tried to steal her from me by slowly poisoning her." Stuart nodded slowly. "The legal system isn't always justice, Gerard. Sometimes good people have to make hard choices." Gerard looked at his friend, recognizing something in Stuart's expression, the look of a man who had made difficult decisions before. "Tell me about your time in the ER. What do you want to know? You didn't just treat patients, did you? In 15 years, you must have seen cases where the system failed, where bad people got away with hurting children." Stuart was quiet for a long moment. "There were cases where we'd patch up a kid and send them home, knowing they'd be back in a few weeks. Cases where the evidence was there, but not strong enough for conviction. Cases where custody went to the wrong parent. What did you do?" "What I had to do." Gerard understood. Stuart hadn't just been a doctor. He'd been a guardian, someone who had taken matters into his own hands when the system failed to protect the innocent. "Eugene McNamara made a mistake when he chose my family to terrorize," Gerard said quietly. "He's about to learn that some people don't forgive, and they definitely don't forget." Chapter 5. The Network. While Emma continued her recovery, the digoxin levels in her system dropping daily, Gerard and Stuart began their own investigation into Eugene's network. What they discovered was more extensive and disturbing than either had imagined. Using Stuart's medical contacts and Gerard's financial analysis skills, they traced the fake babysitting agency that had placed Francine in their home. Heritage Home Care Services existed only on paper and online, but the company registration led them to a small office building in a rundown part of the city. "It's a front," Gerard explained to Detective Ross when they met at the police station. "The agency places babysitters in homes of divorced mothers, specifically targeting families where the ex-husband has lost custody. Then they gather intelligence for kidnapping attempts." Detective Ross spread out the documents Gerard had compiled. "This is impressive work, Mr. Baxter. How did you get access to all this?" "I have friends in financial services. We know how to trace money and corporate connections." What Gerard didn't mention was that some of his methods weren't entirely legal. With Stuart's help, he'd hacked into email accounts, intercepted phone records, and used social engineering techniques to extract information from unwitting sources. The network they'd uncovered was shocking in its scope. Eugene wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger operation run by a man named Philip Skinner, a disbarred lawyer who specialized in helping divorced fathers circumvent custody laws through intimidation, fraud, and worse. Skinner's operation had been active for at least 3 years, with more than a dozen successful kidnappings disguised as legitimate custody disputes. The pattern was always the same: identify divorced mothers with stable new relationships, place infiltrators in their homes through fake service agencies, then systematically undermine the mother's credibility through manufactured evidence of neglect or abuse. They target women like Sally specifically, Gerard explained to Detective Ross. Single mothers who remarried, have stable jobs, and whose ex-husbands have lost custody. They make these women look unfit. Then the biological father swoops in as the hero. And if the biological father doesn't want to pay for the full service, they offer a cheaper option, like systematically poisoning the child to create evidence of medical neglect. Detective Ross closed the file. "Mr. Baxter, this information is incredible, but I have to ask, how did you obtain some of these documents? Some of this looks like it came from private email accounts and phone records." Gerard met the detective's gaze steadily. "I used the same techniques I used to investigate potential fraud in investment portfolios. All perfectly legal research methods." It wasn't entirely true, but Gerard had been careful to keep Stuart's involvement minimal and to ensure that any evidence they'd obtained illegally was backed up by information that could be legally acquired. That night, Gerard sat in his home office while Sally slept upstairs. Emma was finally home from the hospital, and they'd installed a sophisticated security system that Gerard had arranged through his company's corporate security contacts. But Gerard wasn't satisfied with defense. Eugene and his network had tried to destroy his family, and they were still out there, probably targeting other families. The police would eventually catch them, but that could take months or years. And in the meantime, how many other children would suffer? Gerard opened his laptop and began planning. His financial analysis background had taught him that every system had vulnerabilities. You just had to know where to look and how to exploit them. Philip Skinner's operation was extensive, but it was also a business. And businesses had cash flows, dependencies, and pressure points. Over the next week, while publicly cooperating with the police investigation, Gerard began systematically dismantling Skinner's network from the inside. He started with the financial infrastructure. Using techniques he'd learned for investigating corporate fraud, Gerard traced the money flows that kept Skinner's operation running. He identified the bank accounts, the shell companies, the property rentals, and the payment systems that allowed the network to function. Then he began to sabotage them. The first step was the fake agencies. Gerard anonymously reported Heritage Home Care Services and 3 other front companies to state licensing authorities, providing detailed evidence of fraud. Within 48 hours, all 4 agencies had their licenses revoked and their assets frozen. Next came the money. Gerard had discovered that Skinner was using cryptocurrency to pay his network of infiltrators and corrupt officials. Using advanced techniques he'd learned for tracking international money laundering, Gerard identified the digital wallets and began systematically disrupting the payment system. But the most important discovery came when Gerard hacked into Philip Skinner's personal email account. What he found there changed everything. Chapter 6: The Deeper Conspiracy. The emails in Philip Skinner's account revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond what Gerard had imagined. Skinner wasn't just running a custody manipulation scheme. He was part of a much larger operation that involved corrupt family court judges, falsified psychological evaluations, and a network of professionals who were systematically stealing children from protective mothers. Judge Francisco Morse had been taking payments to rule in favor of abusive fathers. Dr. Anna Mead, a court-appointed child psychologist, had been providing false evaluations that painted loving mothers as mentally unstable. Lawyer Nelson Sanford had been coaching abusive ex-husbands on how to manipulate the system. And at the center of it all was Philip Skinner coordinating everything like a criminal mastermind. Gerard printed out every email, every financial transaction, every piece of evidence he could find. But as he read through the communications, he realized something that made his blood boil. Emma wasn't Eugene's first target. Over the past 3 years, Eugene had participated in 4 other cases. For other families destroyed, for other children traumatized, for other mothers whose lives had been shattered by this network of corruption. One of the cases particularly caught Gerard's attention: the file on Stephanie Hunt, a nurse from Portland whose ex-husband had gained custody of their daughter through fabricated evidence of drug abuse. The emails showed that Stephanie had fought the decision, hired private investigators, and eventually uncovered part of the conspiracy. The last email about Stephanie Hunt was dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Problem solved permanently." Gerard's hands trembled as he clicked on the email. Philip Skinner's message to Eugene was brief. Stephanie Hunt will no longer be pursuing her appeals. Car accident last Tuesday. Very sad. These mountain roads can be so dangerous. Gerard stared at the screen, understanding the implication. They hadn't just stolen children. They had murdered anyone who got too close to exposing them. And now Gerard was getting close. He immediately called Stuart, despite the late hour. "Stuart, I need you to come over right now. And bring whatever you use to carry for protection when you worked late night ER shifts." "Gerard, what's wrong?" "I found something, and I think we're all in danger." Stuart arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a small duffel bag that Gerard suspected contained more than medical supplies. They sat in Gerard's home office while Sally and Emma slept upstairs, and Gerard shared what he discovered. "We need to go to the police with this immediately," Stuart said after reading through the evidence. "With what? Illegally obtained emails that would be thrown out of court? Information gathered through computer hacking? Stuart, even if this evidence was admissible, it would take years to prosecute everyone involved. Judge Morse is still on the bench making custody decisions. Dr. Mead is still evaluating families. And while we're waiting for justice, how many more children are going to suffer?" Stuart was quiet for a long moment. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we handle this the way it should be handled. Quickly, efficiently, and permanently. Gerard, you're talking about taking the law into your own hands. I'm talking about protecting my family and making sure these people never hurt another child. Stuart looked at his friend, recognizing the cold determination in Gerard's eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in his own mirror years ago, when a legal system had failed a child who'd come through his ER doors one too many times. What do you need me to do? Gerard smiled for the first time in days, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I need you to help me plan the most comprehensive takedown these people have ever seen. By the time we're finished, Philip Skinner's network is going to wish they'd never heard the name Emma Baxter. The two men spent the rest of the night planning. Gerard's analytical mind mapped out every connection, every vulnerability, every pressure point in network. Stuart's medical knowledge provided insights into methods and timing. Together, they designed a plan that would systematically destroy everyone involved while ensuring that Gerard's family remained safe. But as dawn broke over the city, Gerard realized they had one more problem to solve. Eugene McNamara was still out there, still free, and according to the emails Gerard had intercepted, he was planning one final desperate attempt to take Emma. The emails indicated that Eugene blamed Gerard for stealing his family and was no longer content with legal manipulation. He was planning something direct, something violent, and something that would happen soon. Gerard closed his laptop and looked at Stuart. Change of plans. We're not just taking down the network. We're going to use it to trap Eugene first. Ow! Gerard's smile was sharp and cold. We're going to give him exactly what he wants. We're going to make him think he's won. Chapter 7. The Trap. 2 weeks later, Gerard and Sally put their plan into motion. To the outside world, it appeared that the stress of Emma's poisoning and the police investigation had taken its toll on their marriage. They began arguing publicly, loudly enough for neighbors to hear. Gerard moved into a hotel temporarily, making sure to complain to anyone who would listen about Sally's overprotectiveness and paranoia. The performance was designed to reach Eugene through the network of informants that Gerard had identified in Philip Skinner's emails. Within days, word had spread through the underground channels that the Baxter family was fracturing. Meanwhile, Detective Ross was working with federal authorities to build cases against Judge Morse and Dr. Mead based on the evidence Gerard had provided. But Gerard had been careful to present it as information discovered through his financial investigation techniques, leaving out the illegal hacking. The real plan was much more sophisticated. Gerard had spent 2 weeks studying Eugene's psychological profile, built from their surveillance of his communications, his spending patterns, and his behavior history. Eugene was narcissistic, impulsive, and believed himself smarter than everyone around him. Most importantly, he was impatient. The fake marital problems were designed to make Eugene think his opportunity had finally arrived. If Gerard and Sally were fighting, if their marriage was unstable, if Sally appeared overwhelmed and distracted, then Eugene could position himself as the stable alternative parent. Gerard's move to the Riverside Hotel wasn't random. The hotel was located exactly 12 minutes from Emma's school and had security cameras covering every entrance. More importantly, Gerard had spent a week befriending the hotel staff and arranging for additional surveillance that Eugene wouldn't detect. On a Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after Gerard had moved into the hotel, Eugene made his move. Gerard was sitting in the hotel restaurant, openly drinking and appearing disheveled, when Stuart called. He's taken the bait. Black Ford Explorer, license plate matching the description you provided. He's been sitting across from Emma's school for the past hour. Gerard felt his pulse quicken, but his voice remained steady. Is everyone in position? Detective Ross and his team are 2 blocks away. The school has been notified. Sally's inside with Emma, and they're ready to move to the safe room if needed. And our backup plan? Stuart's voice was grim. Ready if the police plan fails. Gerard had learned from Stephanie Hunt's case that legal justice wasn't always guaranteed. If Eugene somehow escaped police custody or the charges didn't stick, Gerard was prepared to implement a more permanent solution. At 3:15 p.m., as children began filing out of Pine Ridge Elementary, Eugene McNamara stepped out of his vehicle. He was carrying a bouquet of flowers and walking toward the school entrance with the confident stride of a man who believed he was finally getting what he deserved. He made it exactly 50 feet before Detective Ross and 4 officers surrounded him. But as Gerard watched from his hotel room through binoculars, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Eugene wasn't surprised by the arrest. He was smiling. Gerard's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mr. Baxter. The voice was cultured, confident, and completely unfamiliar. This is Philip Skinner. I believe we need to talk. Chapter 8. Face to Face. The meeting location was neutral ground, a public park near downtown, with plenty of witnesses and escape routes. Gerard arrived early, positioning himself on a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. Stewart was 50 yards away, pretending to jog, with a clear view of the entire area. Philip Skinner arrived exactly on time. He was a small, well-dressed man in his 50s, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was used to being the smartest person in the room. He sat down next to Gerard, as if they were old friends meeting for a casual conversation. "Mr. Baxter, you've been busy," Skinner said without preamble. "Impressive work, really. The way you traced our financial networks, identified our operational structure, even managed to provide the police with evidence while covering your own illegal methods. Quite sophisticated." Gerard kept his expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." Skinner laughed. "Please, I know you hack my emails. I know you've been systematically sabotaging my operation for the past 2 weeks. And I know you're responsible for the federal investigation that's currently dismantling 3 years of careful work. If you know all that, why are you here instead of running?" "Because, Mr. Baxter, you've made a fundamental error in judgment. You've assumed that arresting Eugene would end this. But Eugene was just an employee, a desperate, unstable employee who was always destined to be caught eventually." Gerard felt ice forming in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your daughter is still in danger. You've disrupted my network, yes, but you haven't eliminated the demand for my services. There are dozens of men like Eugene out there, and they're willing to pay handsomely for results." Skinner reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. On the screen was a live video feed of Emma's classroom at Pine Ridge Elementary. "Ow! Did you really think we only had one person inside your circle?" Francine was obvious, meant to be discovered. She was never the real threat. Gerard's mind raced through the possibilities. Who else had access to Emma? Who else had they trusted? "Mrs. Wise," Gerard said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Emma's teacher. Kara Wise has been feeding us information about your family for 4 months, Mr. Baxter. She knows Emma's schedule, her habits, her fears. She's been preparing Emma psychologically for the transition to her real daddy." Gerard's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that this isn't over. Arresting Eugene was a temporary setback, but the demand for our services hasn't decreased. In fact, your interference has made Emma a particularly valuable target. Other clients see her as a challenge, a proof of concept. You're threatening my daughter. I'm explaining reality. You can continue your crusade against my network, and we'll continue to adapt and evolve. Meanwhile, Emma remains at risk every day she's in that school, every moment she's out of your sight." Skinner stood up to leave, but Gerard grabbed his arm. "Wait, what would it take for this to end? What would make you leave my family alone?" Skinner smiled coldly. "Nothing you'd be willing to do, Mr. Baxter. You're a good man, a law-abiding citizen. You work within the system. But the system can't protect Emma from people like me. Try me." Skinner studied Gerard's face carefully. "There might be one way, but it would require you to become something you're not. Something your wife might not recognize." "Explain." "My operation succeeds because it's invisible. We operate in shadows. We corrupt systems from within, and we disappear when threatened. But what if someone with your skills, your financial expertise, your analytical mind, your insider access to legitimate institutions? What if someone like that decided to build a competing network?" Gerard stared at him. "You want me to join you? I want you to replace me. Take over my operation, redirect it toward legitimate custody cases, help fathers who actually deserve their children instead of abusers and kidnappers. Clean house from the inside. And if I refuse, Then Emma remains a target. Not just from Eugene, from every desperate father who sees her as the prize that proves our methods work. Skinner walked away, leaving Gerard alone on the bench with a terrible choice. Join the network that had tried to destroy his family, or spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, knowing that his daughter would never be truly safe. That evening, Gerard explained the situation to Sally and Stuart. They sat in their living room, Emma safely asleep upstairs, while Gerard outlined Skinner's proposal. "He's right about one thing," Stuart said grimly. "As long as the demand exists, someone will fill it. Taking down Skinner just creates a power vacuum." But joining them? Sally was horrified. "Gerard, these people try to kill our daughter, and they'll try again unless we control the situation. Sally, if I take over Skinner's network, I can dismantle it from the inside. I can protect Emma and help other families at the same time. Or you could become the very thing you're fighting against." Gerard looked at his wife, understanding her fear. But he also understood something else. Sometimes good people had to make impossible choices to protect what mattered most. "There's another option," Stuart said quietly. "One that doesn't involve joining them or waiting for them to strike again." "What?" Stuart's expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We end this permanently. All of them. Tonight." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. Gerard had spent weeks mapping Philip Skinner's network, identifying every player, every location, and every vulnerability. Now he would use that knowledge to orchestrate their downfall. Stuart's medical background provided the key insight. Skinner's operation depends on coordination and communication. Take out the communication network, and the whole system collapses. They started with Mrs. Cara Wise, Emma's teacher who had been feeding information to the network. Gerard had discovered that she was deeply in debt due to her gambling addiction, debts that Skinner had been paying in exchange for her cooperation. Rather than expose her immediately, Gerard offered her a choice during a private meeting after school hours. "Mrs. Wise, I know about your arrangement with Philip Skinner," Gerard said, sitting across from her in her empty classroom. "I also know about your gambling debts, your financial situation, and the hold Skinner has over you." Cara Wise had always been a nervous woman, but now she looked terrified. "Mr. Baxter, I never meant for Emma to get hurt. I just provided information about schedules and routines. I didn't know they were going to poison her." "But you suspected something was wrong, didn't you? You noticed Emma's symptoms getting worse." Tears began flowing down her face. "I thought maybe she was just tired. Kids get tired. I didn't know." Gerard leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Philip Skinner and tell him that I've agreed to meet with him tonight. You're going to give him the address I specify, and you're going to convince him that I'm ready to negotiate. And if I refuse?" Gerard placed a manila folder on the desk between them. "Then Detective Ross receives this complete documentation of your involvement in child endangerment, fraud, and conspiracy. You'll lose your teaching license, face criminal charges, and still owe money to some very dangerous people. And if I cooperate, then you disappear. Tonight, I've arranged for debt forgiveness and a teaching position in Oregon under a new identity. You start over. You never contact anyone from your old life, and you spend the rest of your career actually protecting children instead of helping people hurt them." Cara Wise stared at the folder, then at Gerard. "Why are you offering me this?" "Because unlike Skinner and his people, I don't believe in destroying people who were manipulated into bad situations. But this is your only chance, Mrs. Wise. Take it or face the consequences." An hour later, Cara Wise made the phone call to Philip Skinner, reading from a script Gerard had provided. The meeting was set for 11 p.m. at an abandoned warehouse that Gerard had selected specifically for its isolation and its security camera blind spots. While Cara Wise boarded a bus to Oregon with a new ID and a fresh start, Gerard and Stuart prepared for the most dangerous part of their plan. "You know this could go very wrong," Stuart said as they checked their equipment in Gerard's garage. "Skinner's not stupid. He might suspect a trap. He'll suspect a trap, but his ego won't let him believe I could outsmart him. Men like Skinner think they're always the smartest person in the room." Gerard's preparation was meticulous. He'd studied Skinner's psychological profile, his business methods, and his operational patterns. Skinner was a controller who relied on manipulation and intimidation, but he was also a coward who had never faced direct physical confrontation. The warehouse Gerard had chosen was one that Meridian Financial had used for storage before moving to a larger facility. Gerard knew the layout intimately, had keys to all the entrances, and had spent the past week installing his own surveillance and communication equipment. At 10:45 p.m., Gerard was in position inside the warehouse, monitoring the approaches through hidden cameras. Stewart was positioned outside with a rifle and a clear line of sight to the main entrance, backup in case things went wrong. Philip Skinner arrived exactly on time, but he didn't come alone. 3 men accompanied him, all carrying weapons and moving with the practiced confidence of professional criminals. Gerard's earpiece crackled with Stewart's voice, for targets, all armed. This isn't a negotiation, it's an execution. Gerard had expected this. Skinner had never intended to negotiate. He'd come to eliminate the threat Gerard represented, just as he'd eliminated Stephanie Hunt. But Gerard had been planning for this scenario. Phase 2, Gerard whispered into his microphone. The warehouse suddenly filled with blinding light as Gerard activated the high-power construction lights he'd installed throughout the space. At the same time, speakers hidden in the rafters began broadcasting a deafeningly loud alarm sound. Skinner and his men were temporarily disoriented, exactly as Gerard had planned. But Gerard had spent weeks practicing in this space with the lights and noise, and he moved through the warehouse like a ghost. The first man went down to a taser Gerard had modified for extended range. The second fell into a pit Gerard had covered with a tarp, landing 12 feet down on concrete. Skinner and the remaining gunmen took cover behind some old equipment, trying to locate Gerard in the chaos of lights and sound. "Baxter," Skinner shouted over the noise. "You're making a mistake. You can't win this. We have people everywhere." Gerard's voice seemed to come from all directions, amplified by the speaker system. "You're right, Skinner. I can't win this through legal channels. But I don't need legal channels. I just need you." The psychological warfare was deliberate. Gerard wanted Skinner afraid, confused, and making mistakes. The turning point came when Stewart's voice crackled through Gerard's earpiece. "Gerard, you need to know. Emma's school just called Sally. There's been an incident. Someone tried to break into the building tonight." Gerard felt ice in his veins. This wasn't Skinner's only play. It was a distraction. While Gerard was focused on the warehouse confrontation, another team was going after Emma directly. "Stewart, get to my house now. Sally and Emma are supposed to be at your apartment. But if someone's at the school..." Gerard's planning shifted into overdrive. He activated the final phase of his warehouse trap. Automated systems that would contain Skinner and his remaining man until police arrived, triggered by Gerard's remote signal. But first, he had to deal with the immediate threat. Gerard emerged from the shadows, no longer hiding, no longer playing games. In his hand was a pistol he'd acquired through Stewart's contacts, and his expression was completely calm. "Philip Skinner," Gerard said, his voice cutting through the alarm noise. "You have 10 seconds to call off whatever team you sent to my home, or I start shooting." Chapter 9. Justice Served. The standoff in the warehouse lasted exactly 43 seconds. Philip Skinner, faced with Gerard's unwavering resolve and the realization that his distraction tactic had been discovered, made the call to abort the home invasion. But Gerard wasn't satisfied with just stopping the immediate threat. "Now you're going to call every person in your network and tell them the operation is permanently shut down," Gerard said, keeping the pistol trained on Skinner. "You're going to transfer control of all financial accounts to a foundation I've established for protecting abused children. And you're going to provide testimony against every corrupt official you've been paying. And if I refuse..." Gerard's smile was arctic. "Then you'll join Stephanie Hunt." Skinner's confident facade finally cracked. "You can't prove anything about Stephanie Hunt. I don't need to prove it to a court. I just need to prove it to the people who cared about her." Gerard activated his phone speaker and placed a call. The voice that answered was female, young, and angry. "Is this him?" the voice asked. "This is Philip Skinner," Gerard confirmed. "The man responsible for your mother's death." Skinner's face went white as he recognized the implications. Gerard had contacted Stephanie Hunt's daughter, now 18 and legally an adult, and provided her with the evidence of Skinner's involvement in her mother's murder. "Mr. Skinner," the young woman's voice was steady despite her obvious emotion. "My name is Jennifer Hunt. You killed my mother to cover up your criminal operation. I've been waiting 2 years to find the people responsible. You can't prove. I don't need to prove anything. I have money, I have time, and I have nothing left to lose. If Mr. Baxter doesn't get justice for my mother, I will. And I won't be as civilized about it as he's being." The psychological pressure was overwhelming. Skinner found himself trapped between Gerard's immediate physical threat, the legal consequences of Gerard's evidence, and the promise of long-term vengeance from Stephanie Hunt's daughter. He broke. Over the next hour, Skinner provided detailed confessions about his entire operation. He gave up the names of every corrupt official, every infiltrator, every client who had paid for children to be stolen from their mothers. He transferred control of his financial assets to Gerard's foundation and provided passwords to encrypted communications that would allow authorities to unravel 3 years of criminal activity. When Detective Ross arrived with backup officers, they found Philip Skinner and his associates secured and ready for transport, along with a comprehensive package of evidence that would ensure convictions for everyone involved. But Gerard's justice went beyond legal consequences. Over the following weeks, as news of the conspiracy broke nationwide, Gerard used his financial expertise and the resources he'd seized from Skinner's operation to implement a different kind of punishment. Judge Francisco Morse found his personal investments wiped out overnight, his pension fund emptied through carefully orchestrated financial manipulation. Dr. Anamid discovered that her professional licenses had been revoked in every state due to anonymous reports of ethical violations backed by meticulous documentation. Lawyer Nelson Sanford's practice collapsed when his client list was leaked to authorities, revealing his involvement in dozens of fraudulent custody cases. Eugene McNamara, facing federal charges for child endangerment and conspiracy, found that his legal troubles were the least of his problems. Gerard had systematically destroyed his ability to function in society, his credit destroyed, his employment prospects eliminated, his reputation ruined in every community where he might try to start over. But Gerard's masterpiece was what he did with Philip Skinner's assets. The Stephanie Hunt Foundation, established with money seized from Skinner's operation, became a national organization dedicated to protecting mothers and children from custody manipulation. Within 6 months, it had helped reunite 12 families that had been destroyed by Skinner's network and provided legal support for dozens more. Eugene served 4 years in federal prison. When he was released, he found a world where Gerard Baxter's influence made it impossible for him to rebuild his life. Every job application was rejected, every apartment rental denied, every attempt to start fresh blocked by the comprehensive blacklisting Gerard had arranged. 5 years later, Gerard sat in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports for the foundation that had grown into a multi-million-dollar organization. Emma, now 12 years old, was doing homework at the kitchen table, healthy, happy, and completely unaware of how close she'd come to being stolen from the family that loved her. Sally appeared in the doorway with coffee for both of them. "The Hunt Foundation just got approval for the new legislation," she said, settling into the chair across from Gerard's desk. "Mandatory psychological evaluations for all family court personnel, enhanced background checks for child care providers, and federal oversight of custody decisions in domestic abuse cases." Gerard smiled, remembering the terrified little girl in the hospital bed with an 4-drip flushing poison from her system. That experience had taught him that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought in courtrooms or through official channels. Sometimes justice required good people to become something harder, something more dangerous than the threats they faced. "Any word on Eugene?" Gerard asked. "He was arrested again last week. Attempted burglary in Nevada. 3rd strike. He's looking at life under their 3 strikes law." Gerard nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction. Eugene McNamara had spent 5 years learning that there were consequences for threatening Gerard Baxter's family. Now he would spend the rest of his life remembering that lesson. Emma's laughter drifted in from the kitchen as she worked on her math homework, the sound of a child who felt safe and loved in her home. Gerard closed the foundation reports and walked into the kitchen, where his daughter was waiting for help with fractions. As he sat down beside her, Emma looked up with the bright smile that had made him a father the day he'd married Sally. "Daddy, Mrs. Johnson says I'm the best at math in my whole class." "That's because you're brilliant, sweetheart, just like your mom." Gerard helped Emma with her homework, listened to her stories about her friends, and tucked her into bed with the usual routine of stories and songs. To any observer, he was simply a devoted father enjoying a quiet evening with his family. But Gerard Baxter was more than that now. He was a protector, a guardian who had learned that sometimes love required darkness, that sometimes justice required methods the law couldn't sanction. Philip Skinner's network was gone. Eugene McNamara was destroyed, and Emma Baxter was safe. For Gerard, that was victory enough. But in his home office, locked in a safe that only he could access, Gerard kept detailed files on dozens of other cases. Other children at risk, other families being targeted, other corrupt networks that thought they were untouchable. The Stephanie Hunt Foundation was his public face, his legal method of protecting families. But Gerard Baxter's real work happened in the shadows, where good men did terrible things to ensure that innocent children could sleep safely in their beds. And there you have it. And he was very good at it. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.